What time is it? You're like afternoon, evening?
414.
414.
Like the AKG 414.
Oh yeah, I had one of those. A neighbor lent it to me, and it was one of those. He had no purpose for it, and it was an original one. Not original, but like, you know, the model that everybody drools over.
The 414 EB or whatever that has like the
EBULS or BULBS.
It has the C12 capsule in there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I had one. He gave it to me. Well, he loaned it to me, and he had no use for it. And I used it on guitar. I used it on snare with a pad, and it was unbelievable. I used it all the time. Such a beautiful thing. Then the guy moves. He leaves the city and he's gone. And I'm like, I've just scored a free, $2,000-$3,000 microphone. And then maybe like 5 years later, he calls me. He's like, hey man, I'm going to swing by. I'm in the neighborhood. I'm going to grab that mic. And I was like, no. And I didn't wasn't in a position to replace it. And like when you have something for free and like, I guess I could have offered him money for it, but like he knew what it was worth. So
yeah, that's tough. I mean, those mics are killer. The vintage AKG. I mean, I live in the land of AKG. They were made in Vienna before they got.
Yeah. Cool.
I have a friend who gave me a pair of 451s, but the vintage ones, the black 451s. I use those things on everything, everything, and it's the same thing. It's got this vibe, this mojo, and it's those are the kinds of microphones where you don't try 5 things and say, oh, do I like this one better or this one better? It's like, okay, this is the microphone for this sound. Yeah. That's the vibe I want. Yeah.
I probably would now, looking back, I probably would buy that. I actually, surprisingly, I didn't use it on vocals. I never liked it on vocals, but that's the mic I would go buy today and not have to worry. Like you said,
but have you ever gotten into, did we talk about this, building microphones?
No. No.
Because I built some, and actually the microphone that I use for, it's either bass, saxophone, or female vocals. It's like a copy of a C12, but with all original parts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I built that maybe 2-3 years ago and have burned it in like a few hundred hours. And now the thing sounds incredible. So on the record that I sent you, we use it on the bass. Of course, we use it as a bass player. Like the best is reserved for the bass, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas other people who are doing bigger sessions, it's like, what do I got left? Like, would a 57 work on this thing?
Man, I got to tell you this, that if this gets included or not, it's okay. I did a session in Vienna at a studio that will remain nameless, but it was a very expensive studio in terms of cost of being there, but also the amount of gear and just money invested in keeping the place open.
Yeah.
And I walked in, it was a jazz session, and the first thing the engineer says when he looks at me, and this is in half German, half English, but he basically says, "Oh, you play upright bass? I thought it was going to be electric bass." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I mean, it's okay. I brought my own microphone. I've got a Flea 47, which is the best modern equivalent of the U47." And he's like, "No. We're going to use my microphone. I want to use my microphone." And it was an AKG D112, like the bass drum mic, because he was expecting a bass drum. I'm like, okay, so you just think that what this is a giant bass drum with strings. It's like you want your $150 microphone compared to my like $3,000 tube microphone that I simply picked just for bass. And so like you said, like,
well, how did it go? Did he use a D112?
He did. I reluctantly forced him
to put a second one on the fingers.
The U47. He was reluctant, but he put it up. Yeah. I listened back to the mix. It didn't sound so good. And then the irony is that they released this was a big project with video and everything. They released the video, and the music was somehow recorded or uploaded at the wrong sample rate, so everything was a half step flat. And so I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm one of those annoying people with perfect pitch. So I'm like, why is everything really like microtonal? Like, why do my fingers not in the right spot? And of course, like, no one caught it. So it didn't matter in the end anyways how my bass sounded.
Well, that's interesting. You might funny enough, I have used a D112 on an upright bass. And it's because I was running out of options, and because I have that mentality too, that it is a kick drum with strings. But I probably used it on the sound hole, and then I would have put perhaps a condenser or something on the fingers for the clicky click. Now this would have been like bluegrass too. So all you really want is like boom, 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 and then like big low end. But guilty actually. So that guy and I are in good company.
you know what? You're forgiven. It's okay. My part of my purpose in life as a bass player is to educate people on the reality of what our instrument is. And as a recording engineer, it's to atone for all the sins of every other recording engineer who has just completely destroyed my sound. I
would say that I've recorded many an instrument. I haven't done harp. I would say that probably one of the hardest to record to be the upright bass. It's just what the reason being is that, and listener, we're going to move on in a second, but the reason being is that it's so big and boomy, and then you have the fingers and all of the tickies that you want up there, but the sound that you're looking for, or the sound of electric bass in the mix, is in the mid range, in the low mids, and that is the hardest thing to record on the upright bass.
Yeah, I'll give everyone a 15-second. Oh, don't time me. Less than 1 minute primer on this. Easiest thing you can do is take a large diaphragm condenser, put it directly in front of the bridge about a foot out. So for European listeners, 30 centimeters maximum, 12 inches for our North American friends, right in front of the bridge. And the way I think about it is that it's not like an electric bass where the deeper you go or the lower you go, the more bass you get. I want it to be transparent, and I want the lowest notes and the highest notes to be the same volume and the same amount of depth. And so you find the position where the low end is not this rumbly sub bass, but you get something that's even, because then if you want to add more low end, you don't get like 6 notes that are super, the rest that are really, really thin. So you go for transparency, you go for evenness from top to bottom, and the microphone in front of the bridge gives the right amount of finger punch. If you move it a little bit higher, it gets a little bit more of the finger sound, but it could get woofier too, depending on where it is. So there's kind of a sweet spot. On that axis. But that's like my go-to. I can usually get my bass sound up and running in 2 minutes. And then it's always like 2 frequencies on the bass, 70 hertz and 100 hertz. You take those out with dynamic EQ and you're golden.
Yeah, no, that's probably gun to my head where I would go. But obviously, I was probably overthinking it back in the day. My question for you, Danny, you're a jazz bassist. We have the studio, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, how that is going to be connected to the label. But from what we're talking about now, we're boring the listener about recording and engineering, from playing and performing and recording, how did that transition into wanting to start a record label? Can you kind of fill in that gap? Because there's a lot of people who play music, perform a certain genre, and there's a lot of people who are active in the studio, but it stops there for most people. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know this, Scott, but this is actually my second time around running a record label. I have this news clipping that I'll show you at the end of this call. But when I was 15, I worked in a studio with 2 of my friends, and this was a real. Looking back, we were really fortunate. We had my friend Matt. We took over his parents' basement, like really built room construction, had Neumann microphones, and
wow,
it's a real deal. Like recording punk bands and metal bands and rock bands for $10 an hour for like 3 years. I spent my 10,000 hours down in that basement. And we started a record label to actually represent teenage bands. And we were booking shows and doing showcases.
Wow, I did not know this.
Yeah. And then we all went to college and, went our separate ways. So I had a little bit of a taste of this. And it was really fun because bands were excited to make music and to, I've been a performer my whole life, but to be on the other side of things and create opportunities for musicians back then was a really cool way to support the community and meet people. So
you see there's like a natural connection between the studio and the label. You've always felt that.
Absolutely. So coming back into it like 20 years later, the idea for me here was I have this studio, I have the space, I'm making great records, I'm recording my heroes, I get to work with so many people, and actually as a really active jazz bassist, like where I'm playing around Europe a lot, I get to play with a lot of different people. But there's also certain people that I'm precluded from playing with just because of the nature of my instrument or the genre. So being an engineer is fun because it gives me a chance to actually work with all the people that I couldn't work with otherwise. So all that to say is when you're in that space where you're working with everybody, you start to see, okay, what other kinds of support do these musicians need? It's like everyone is looking to get their music out. Everybody's like, hey, do you know a label? That's always the first question after the record is done. Like, do you know a label? Like, what can we do? And, running a label, it's like, if I really wanted to support every record that came through my studio, it would just be a full-time act of charity and philanthropy that I can't afford to do time-wise or financially. Yeah. But you start to realize that the average musician who is real, and this is a generalization, so I'm sorry if this comes across as being really one-dimensional, but I would say that your average musician who focuses a lot on their performing craft, most of them have the same questions about, okay, how does the business work? And being in the recording studio, you're kind of forced to deal with that because you're mastering for streaming and physical distribution, or you're talking to vinyl pressing plants, or you're talking to different other labels, or you're in contact with the managers who are like, hey, you need to make this DDP file for us. So you kind of get a sense of how that part of the industry works just as a function of having to make these records. And you find yourself answering these questions pretty often to the point where it's like, okay, whether you're a huge label or an independent label, it's kind of like self-publishing books. Like the process is the same. How you make the record, where it goes, of course you get different advantages and you get different resources. But ultimately, I just found myself having a lot more information than I thought about it, and actually being a go-to resource. And that was, again, sort of the thing that made a natural connection. It's like I started to fill in the gaps for myself, and I'm like, okay, this is something I can offer other people.
It's so funny what you're describing, because just last week we had Sun Records on the podcast, and the discovery that you're making 40, 50, 70 years later after Sam Phillips, it was the same thing. He's like, I'm recording these artists in my studio, then I'm shipping these records off to a label to make money when I can just be doing that. And learning the process. It's just so funny. Here we are 50, 60, 70 years later, and it's still happening. Do the three jobs of playing bass, engineering, and producing, and then the label side of things, do those scratch the same itch for you, or are they three individual itches?
That's a great question. They're all the itches are adjacent and overlapping.
It's getting gross, isn't it? Yeah. Keep going with it. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, I think that one scratch solves it all. I know. I think in this case, they all tap into the same creative spirit. I think there's a couple parts of it, and I'll get a bit into the nitty gritty because I think it's for me it's important to describe it this way. But on the one hand, yes, like they're all creative musical adventures, and they're all entrepreneurial. And I think if you have an entrepreneurial mind, like you talk about the entrepreneurial seizure or the creative seizure that happens when you have these ideas. And I think when you're creating music with great musicians, or you're in the studio and you're making great records, or you have an opportunity to get your music out there, I think those can all be tapped into the same mode of creativity. And for me, the process of just having a final product, whether that's a concert, whether that's a recording, whether that's a physical LP, whether that's a royalty statement, like whatever it is, it's important for me to have some sort of proof of my creative thinking or my creative spirit. I like to see that. I like to have that. I'm assuming for most of us who make records, it's probably the same.
That's interesting.
Same thing. Yeah, just some sort of proof of that. And I think at the same time, the modes of creativity in these three areas are also very community oriented. And I think that's everything I've done in my life that's been entrepreneurial or something that's really outward facing, whether it's the books I've published, whatever, it's always in service of the community and trying to create opportunities for people to come together.
Okay.
Right?
That's you're going ahead. You're reading my questions ahead, because that's my next question about community. But I want to just hold on a sec. I want to go back to this giant itch that you have, or the adjacent itches. Would you be content with just being a bass player and not doing those other things? Because there's musicians who just show up to the studio, play the notes, and go home.
You're asking questions like my therapist. This is great. The answer is no. I would not be satisfied just playing the bass. And part of the reason that I do these things is because it takes the pressure off of having to excel primarily at one mode of musical creativity. As a bass player, like I'm in a position where I feel very fortunate to play regularly with my heroes and make music on the level that I dream of. I'm really I love that. At the same time, if that was the only thing that I did, when I have these low moments where I'm like, oh, why do I do this? Or, oh, this gig sucked. Or, oh, I just got my butt kicked on one of these gigs. That all or nothing mentality about my creativity, even if I'm really well-rounded and balanced and grounded, like that can kind of bring down the whole feeling of what I'm doing creatively. Now, if I have a crappy gig, but like I know I'm making some great records in my studio, or the label is succeeding, or whatever.
You're speaking my language. You're leveraging. It's so crazy. Yeah, that's so great. So you would have to be a virtuoso in your mind.
Yes. And the thing is
at one of those things.
Like my friends and mentors, like, again, this is said with the highest level of humility and respect, but my friends and mentors are the virtuosos, the ones who are on the records that we love listening to, or like, oh, hey, like one of my mentors for mixing and mastering's onto his 8th or 9th Grammy now. Wow. It's like, so these are the people that I look up to the most, and they set the bar. And I'm like, okay, of course I strive for the highest level of what I can do. Yeah. But I'm not all my eggs in one basket kind of person. And
I think you're totally right. And it is like, it comes from a place of insecurity for me. It comes from a place of insecurity, a little bit of laziness too. Like, it's easier to be a B- at 10 different things than to try to be an A+ at one thing.
Yeah.
So
it's true. It's funny. This is an anecdote from about 10 years ago, but there's this organization called the International Society of Bassists. Okay. And they have an international jazz bass competition every 2 years. And in 2015, I did it in Colorado, and I took 2nd place. And then 2 years later, I did it again with completely different judges, completely different bass players from all over the world. And I took 2nd place again. And I was like, all right, you know what? I'm cool. I am so cool with being 2nd place. Like that is, perpetual 2nd place is like, it's great. It's an honor.
You know what? I feel terrible for the athletes at the Olympics who come like 12th. Because they're like the 12th best in the world at that sport. And they're not even close to being a household name. Like even 2nd or 3rd, like even barely makes it as a household name but to be 12th, to be like, I'm the 12th best runner on the planet. And yet that's nothing. Yeah. that makes me depressed.
No, I get it. And I think in that sense, like you said, a little bit of laziness and like aiming for, the top 95%. It's cool because the thing for me is it's really important. It's not just about being well-rounded, but if someone's looking at my creative output from the outside, which I guess literally everybody listening to this is, maybe this is a good way for them to think about it too. It's like someone will listen to my bass playing and be like, wow, this is a competent professional musician. And the mixes sound good. Mm-hmm. And the production sounds good.
Yeah.
And it looks good.
Yeah.
And this and this. And it's just, it creates this bigger window
to tie this back to the label conversation, I think any label is going to be more successful if they have good production, great looking branding, which Hideout does, great music, a community. If you're doing all of those things at a B+, at an A-, top 95%, you are way more likely to kill it than an album that comes out that is just phenomenal with none of those things, like with an F in all of those things. Or if there's branding is out of this world, but everything else sucks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this mentality of if you build it, they will come. It's like, it's not true.
No. Yeah.
The creativity that stands on its own at a genius level, like if it's not, we live in a world where people judge books by their cover, like always have.
Yeah.
It's like the cream rises to the top, but also like you have to invest time and sweat and money and all sorts of stuff to really get it out there. That's also where I'm fortunate, just to mention, and I know we'll dive into this, but I have two co-partners for the label who excel in, like, we're talking about the creative things. And these, Anna Reisigel and Clemens Rofner are both extremely creative people, also bass players, but their level of organization is way above not just what I'm capable of doing, but what I even strive to do.
Okay.
And so having them be a part of that, it's like rounds out all the creative tendencies that I have as well.
I love that. And you just answered question number 3, which we haven't even got to question number 2 yet, because I do want to talk about them, but I love that. Danny hasn't seen the questions ahead of time, folks. This is great. You're talking about building this around community. Like if you were all by your lonesome in Austria, and by the way, folks listening are not hearing an Austrian accent. So your leap from Buffalo, USA to Austria, you can touch on that. Who cares? But the point is if you were all by your lonesome in Austria, do you think you would still start a label? How important is community?
Yeah, so community for me is extremely important, and I would probably have the idea and the enthusiasm and the wish to start a label. And it maybe 10 years ago, I'm 35 now. At 10 years ago, I would have probably tried to do it on my own. At this point, I am so quick to know what my strengths are and are not that immediately I would. And this is what happened when I talked to Anna about joining. But if I have an idea of this scale, I immediately just think about who can I work with that will round out
Good for you.
What I'm able to do. Yeah.
I mean, I think jazz is kind of synonymous with community and with multiple musicians and shows and stuff, perhaps different from, say, pop or hip hop or classical, where you think of that individual artist. To me, jazz is the drummer, the bassist, the singer or the sax player. So I feel like it just makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it depends
jazz
on the
scene.
Yeah. It depends on the community of people to come and listen and appreciate improvised live music. It was always a social music. Here in Vienna, there's a really vibrant jazz scene, and there are, I want to say, 4 clubs, or maybe three really serious clubs where you can hear music every night of the week with international artists.
Wow.
And you can go out on any of the nights and go to these different clubs and bump into musicians that who are going to hear other people play. So the lifeblood of this art form is actually communal support.
That's really cool. So these partners that you have that are starting the label, so you had this idea. I mean, when you have an entrepreneurial seizure, it's hard to find other people who are having the same seizure at the same time, or who can see your seizure for what it is.
Yeah.
So how did you bring these people into the fold, or did they bring you into the fold? And then elaborate a little bit more on their skills, passions, and how they complement yours.
Yeah. So I had this idea about a year and a half ago, and really the whole purpose, besides, what I said, supporting the musicians that I was mentioning, was really just a way to leverage the studio space. How can I continue to make more records here, build a legacy, and kind of think long-term usage. So with that, I've known Anna Reisigal, who's a great bass player here in Vienna. I've known her for 5 years now. I've recorded her a bunch. We were just really good friends. And one of the things I was always impressed with about her was her ability to, she's made quite a few records and successfully applied for some really great funding opportunities. She's won some great awards and grants. So she's really tapped into that part of promoting yourself, which I never I do, like, through my Instagram ads and my books and stuff, but promoting myself as an artist, like, I never really did. And so with her records, she always had a great social media strategy. She had compelling artwork. There was always a story. She was always producing concerts with themes and, different, not costumes, but like, custom made clothing and stuff. Like, it's really, really deep. And so when I was thinking, okay, who's the perfect person to round this out with me? I've got the studio. I want to make the records. I can produce. I can do all the musical parts of things, and I know how to make distribution happen. But in terms of all of the other things, the social media strategy, the outward reaching portion, and I also, like, if I continue to just make business decisions according to my own comfort level, like, I'm going to hit so many blind spots because I'm just going to do what I do.
Good for you.
And so Anna was the kind of, is the person who says, well, hey, actually, Danny, what about this? Or, like, we got to think about these people, or we have to remember this thing. And so for that, she's amazing and a great musician, great sense of what's going on in the community and who's doing what now musically. So in terms of the organization and social media, getting funding, she helps artists apply for funding in Austria. She handles a lot of the design choices and organizing those things. Like, she is on it. And
that's great.
Like,
just the social media alone, to have a partner who is passionate, let alone talented on that side of things, is huge.
Exactly. And so the story of how we got to Clemens Rofner, Clay, our third partner. So Anna and I actually applied for a grant in Vienna last year, about a year ago, that we ended up not getting. We were denied. It was like a very intense 3-month grant application through it's called the Wirtschaftsagentur Wien, which is like the Vienna business agency. And I think we were a little too ambitious in the sense, go big or go home. We were ambitious. Sure. We asked for a lot of money, and they said, hey, like, we don't think your marketing strategy is compelling enough, or, we don't really see whatever. Yeah. It was a no. And about 5 minutes, I was like, this is stupid. Like, we could be so awesome. And then I got over myself and I was like, Anna, we don't have the money, but do you still want to do this anyways? And she's like, 100%. I still see the need for this. But then we agreed that we needed a third person, and Clay came in the fold. We both knew Clay. Clay is also a jazz bass player. So there's 3 jazz bass players running this.
Perfect. That would make a great band.
Yeah, exactly. There will be no drama. That's the great thing. We're drama free.
That's a lot of D112s you're going to need.
Yeah, oh my God. Exactly. Lots of Mark bass 8x10s and all sorts of stuff. But Clay is awesome because, like, like Anna, great bass player, but also a really great organizational mind. And Clay is one of the booking agents and managers for like one of the largest festivals in Western Austria. And so he's in contact with booking agents all over Europe. He tours with some great big acts like Anushka Shankar and Manu Dilago, and he's like doing all the trade shows and just like really, really has a thumbprint on what's going on festival wise and organizationally with all of the major booking agents and clubs around Europe. So and he's one of those guys where they're like, Clay, like I don't know, I lost this weird screw on this vintage piece of something. He's like, oh, I know a guy. He's just a guy who knows.
Yeah.
He knows everybody.
So you have your bases covered. That was a pun. I did not mean to do that. I swear to you, I did not mean to do that.
We do have our bases covered. That is.
Oh my gosh.
You get double points.
There's the pull quote, please.
We have our bases.
So that is terrible. I wouldn't even, if I had known that, I wouldn't have said it. If I had spotted that.
Again, no judgment here. I like a good pun. But So between the three of us, we have all of the logistics, all of the connection potential, and also just actually being able to make the record. So we parsed out who does what, and the thing is, I have been the quote unquote CEO of some other startup businesses, but I really just wanted to delegate myself to only being responsible for making records. And so far, it's been great in that the two of them are so reliable and so independent and dependable and team working oriented that I really can just make the records, do all that, and everything else is being taken care of.
Do you find that there's this other part of partnering with people that we don't talk about, and that's that we get to share the burden, we get to share the stress, we get to divide the shame, the fear, the imposter syndrome gets to be divided by 3. It's what being a solo artist on stage versus having a backing band. I felt like, well, at least I got the other guys to take some of the eyeballs off of me for a few minutes,
Yeah, I think it's the difference between being a front person or, in my case, a sideman.
Yeah. If
I could play with the same group of people, let's say it's a quintet, and we're playing the same exact tunes. Like, situation A, I'm just the bass player. We're playing the same exact tunes. Like, I feel great because I'm just responsible for my 20% of that. But if I'm the band leader, even it could be the exact same outcome, the same tunes, the same format, same everything, I feel 100% responsible for it.
Yeah.
Because technically it's more of a representation of the people I choose and the repertoire, like everything. Somehow the responsibility of how everybody performs is still a reflection of me. So in this case, sharing the burden of that really takes the pressure off. We can all learn from our mistakes together, but there's like this just shared sense of responsibility, which I love.
You and I have chatted before, although I'm still not entirely sure about the name Hideout and where that came from.
So my recording studio it's in what's called a souterrain, which is it's not like a basement, but like when you're walking, maybe it's like this in Toronto, I'm sure. You're walking down the street and you see a staircase that goes down maybe like 6 steps under a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a full basement. It's like a souterrain. I don't know.
I'm not sure. We don't really have a word for it here either, but like a walkout or something, but sure.
Yeah, exactly. So the studio in Vienna, there's not even a sign, and technically one of the doors has been sealed off.
Okay.
So the only entrance is like this pair of gray doors that's really, there's nothing special about it. And you walk down underneath this building, and it's like, even if you peer in through the doors, you don't really see what's going on. So it's kind of like a hideout.
Okay. So
I call that Hideout Recording, and then as a way to keep the branding consistent, Hideout Records.
Well, that sounds completely understandable. It's a great idea. And I love the branding that you have, and I love that you've decided to connect it with the studio. We met a few months ago on a clarity call. And when you were first getting your label started or doing research with your partners, what parts of running a label were most confusing or intimidating to you guys?
Yeah, this is a great question. First off, I'm also just going to give you a shout out because that
Please.
clarity call was awesome. And for
It was
anyone who's
fun.
considering it, Scott doesn't get any money for me saying this, but the clarity call, like the 1 hour that we spent together, gave us months of things to think about. So for anyone who's considering it, that was one of the most helpful things for us actually getting to the point where this record now is coming out. So it answered all our questions. So
That's
kudos
lovely.
to you, Scott.
That's lovely. Well, I don't get any money for that, but you definitely get money for that. So thank you very much.
So your question, what was the sorry,
yeah, like
one
what
more
was
time.
confusing to you? I mean, you're very competent. You have 3 people in the industry. Why book the clarity call? What were you unsure of?
Part of it was branding, was knowing what, like how do we present ourselves? How do we pick a niche for ourselves? You know, jazz is a pretty wide genre, even though it's very specific. But if you look at the major players in the jazz world, you've got Blue Note Records, you've got ECM Records, and those are labels that are competitively distributing 50 or maybe even 100,000 units of physical for per
Right.
release. And that's not chump change, and especially considering that vinyl sales are the highest they've been in maybe 30, 40 years. And the largest percentage of that is jazz. It's still quite competitive. So our thing was, okay, how do we pick the niche? Who is our audience? Because in a way, jazz is a very audiophile oriented community. And also like you were saying, our audience is kind of the different groups kind of overlap. Like the players are the audience, but the listeners are also the audience. And so how do we market to 2 or 3 different groups of people as a way of selling our services, but also promoting our music? I think, if you are doing this in another genre, I mean, I can't say for certain. I don't know what it's like in the pop landscape or maybe the classical music landscape. But yeah, I think the most confusing part was like, how do we nail down exactly who we are actually presenting this to? I think that still continues to be a question, like who's our audience, basically.
Do you think the answer to that question is you? How much of your preference is just as a music consumer and a music fan do you put into making these records and how you present these records is something that you would want to buy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to be selfish for a second. When it comes to the mixing and mastering, 100% of it is my preference. Like this is definitely it's just in the same way that if someone hires me to play bass, they're not going to say, "Hey, we want you to sound like, I don't know, Ray Brown, or we want you to sound like Geddy Lee." Like, no, like you're hiring me, you're going to get me.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the production of these records, I think each label has its signature, whether it's for Blue Note Records, I think there's 2. One is the cover, like the cover art was
of course,
exceptional. And also Rudy Van Gelder, one of the most legendary engineers of all time, had a sonic signature. Same with ECM Records. There are a lot of labels that have their signature, but in our case, one of the things that I wanted to do is make sure that we are an audiophile label, because for me, the sound that's what I love the most about records. So in terms of that's my preference, my mixing preference, my reverb preferences. If I have a vision for something, like I'm going to make it happen that way. And in terms of the taste, this is where it gets interesting, because Anna and Clay and I had a lot of discussions about who we want to represent in the Austrian jazz scene, right? Our label is about providing opportunities to people who may not have a chance to get their music out. And if you look at the statistics and kind of the leading records that are out there, especially when you get more in a niche, it's not very diverse. And so if I go based on who I know or what my preferences are, then it doesn't matter what label releases the music. It's going to look the same as what a lot of other people are doing. So we had a lot of discussions about, do we want to represent younger musicians? And the answer is yes. We're trying to give younger musicians who may not get their music out, give them an opportunity to do that. Also, we have this idea, and this is actually the first release we're going to be doing. If this is a later question of yours,
go.
The idea is called Carte Blanche, and we do it once a year. Basically, we pick two musicians that have never played together, two jazz musicians or improvising musicians, and say, you have to get together and write an album's worth of music, but we'll give you 2 free studio days. We'll produce the record for free. We'll print it for vinyl. We'll do all the distribution and give you a release concert. All you have to do is show up and make the music. You pick the band. And in this case, we wanted one female artist and one male artist because we wanted to have equal representation there.
Sure.
And it's important for us to create those opportunities. It is a sensitive topic. Like, how do you talk about gender representation and diversity in the music industry and in the jazz industry, where I think the latest statistic I read was 27% of musicians in the music industry or the jazz industry are female. And of that 27%, at least 60% are singers. How do you create? Yeah, exactly. How do you create opportunities for people? One, without it being a marketing tactic, but to really just promote diversity and really make sure that there's equity in the music industry. So again, Clay and Anna and I had a lot of conversations about how to do this. And again, if I was just going off of my gut instinct about who I know and who I want to produce, it wouldn't be very diverse just because of that lack of equity anyways. So we're really trying to make sure that we're considering all the possibilities, all the musicians who, not just who we know, but who are making great music in Austria who may not have had these opportunities before, and figure out how do we create a platform where underrepresented voices can thrive. It may not be the most, how do I say this? It's not about profit orientation. It may not be the most, it may not pay the most in the end. We're not going for 10 million streams with whatever, following different formulas for getting there. It's really just what's the best for the community at the local level. And if that grows over time, I'm interested in, can you educate me about jazz fans and jazz music? Because you talked a little bit about jazz records that are still being sold en masse today on vinyl. I'm curious about, for me, when I think of jazz, I think of going to a record store and looking and trying to grab an obscure jazz record or a classic jazz record for a good price. My jazz collection, I think I have a couple modern. I'm a big Diana Krall fan because I'm Canadian, but aside from her, it's classic records. It's older records. And so I'm just curious about today's jazz fan. What's the split when it comes to the classic catalog or just the deep catalog versus new jazz? Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have a very solid answer on that.
You can guess. Nobody's gonna fact check you.
Yeah, I would say there are some people who are diehard classic jazz lovers, but I would say that if we're talking about, it gets back to what we talked about before, the audience segmentation. Who is the audience? Is it the musicians? Is it just the listeners? Is there overlap? I would say that most of the serious musicians I know are open to checking out everything. So whether it's really modern, it could be totally free. It could be, modern representations of Dixieland music. I would say that your average jazz aficionado, and I say that because I don't know so many casual jazz listeners. People are like, oh, I just dabble in jazz. I think it's one of those things.
You don't know them, but I think that's the majority of jazz listeners.
Jazz dabblers. Yeah, could be.
I mean, look at the playlists, like Rainy Day Jazz. True. Those are millions and millions of listeners, and people are just there for fill my living room with cool music.
Yeah. Maybe it's just my own.
Sorry to say.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's just my own bias, where I'm like, wow, people actually like this. Like, they must really love it. I would say that most of the people I meet are pretty open-minded to checking out everything. I think, there are some people who are really classic jazz fans, but the cool thing about the jazz, I had a teacher who said this once. He's like, jazz is one of the only art forms that has really been cataloged and documented and recorded from the beginning of its inception. Like,
oh, interesting.
Recording technology came out, 120 years ago, maybe. The first jazz records came out like 1915, 1917.
Wow.
And we've been going strong ever since, so I think the music scene represents that as well. Like, if you just like the classic jazz, you go to New York, like, you can hear Dixieland and swing and ragtime. You can also hear jazz that's, hard bop and post bop from the 50s and 60s. You can hear modern stuff. I think the split in terms of what type of jazz, like classic versus modern, it might not be as divided amongst the listeners as it is with the musicians, because I think, again, the music is such a social music, and it's really more about the improvised art form, that I think it's like, if it's good, it's good. Like Duke Ellington said, there's two kinds of music. There's good music and bad music. To paraphrase there. Yeah. But if it's good, it's good. I mean, again, that could be my own bias.
Years ago, I read a book called Playing Changes by Nate Chinnan, which is about like the future of jazz and modern jazz, and kind of tackling this question a little bit about, who's doing jazz now. And I find it very fascinating because, like, on another side of things, classical music, I'm very interested and excited about classical music that's being written and recorded today, like brand new, maybe not the compositions, but the artists being young, and the labels being cool, and the music being recorded now. I'm very drawn to that, and I listen to it quite a lot, but I don't have any records that weren't made in the past 5 years, 10 years in my collection for classical music. It's just, to me, I'm just kind of curious, because you're in this position, you're making new jazz. Are you competing against somebody saying, you know what, I'll just buy a Monk record instead because it's cooler,
Yeah, well, and I think that's also, like, for example, I played a tour this past week, and stayed with the concert promoter in Linz, and we stayed in his loft upstairs, and he had a record collection of thousands of records, and he's like, yeah, this is like every Coltrane record I could find, this is every Monk record I could find, this is every Ornette record I could find, every Sun Ra record I could find.
Wow.
I think in those cases, especially with the serious collectors, because there are a ton of vintage record collectors here, I think it's more about representing the history than it is about finding the one thing that they really, really love.
Yeah. That's true.
I think, because once you're a vinyl, also, like, that's the cool thing about jazz, is that, the vinyl sales and the CD sales are as strong as ever. I did a tour where we only printed 100 CDs, but like, we sold out.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's like that. You don't hear about that happening so often, our form of merch. But I think there's something about the jazz listener where, again, it's less about segmentation and more just about, like, I just consume this media. Like, I have a huge appetite for it somehow.
Yeah, and I think it has a little bit to do, when you said that jazz is one of the only genres that is traceable on record from its inception. I feel like, and I could just be biased to this conversation, that jazz and recordings are more connected than other genres. Certainly more than, classical, because classical goes back to before recordings. But just this idea of, like, hearing a recording of a live performance, or collecting those classic Blue Note records, it just feels like jazz club, jazz records, those are all part of the scene. You can't have one without the other.
Exactly. Well, and the thing is, I had a teacher who gave this analogy back in college, and it's a hockey analogy. So you and I will appreciate it.
There you go. Yeah.
he said, one of the differences between classical music and jazz music is like classical music is a routine. It's like figure skating. You perfect that routine, and so you can replicate it over and over again. Mm-hmm. It's like jazz is like a hockey game. It's like you have the highest level of skilled craftsmanship who are constantly improvising, but they're all aiming. Yeah, anything can happen. They're reaching for the same goal.
I love that.
And I, thinking about that, jazz club meaning jazz record, I think one of the differences, even with excuse me, even with pop records or rock bands, you hear Zeppelin live, it's going to be amazing. No doubt it's going to be amazing. They're going to play the same songs, right? That's a routine. With jazz, it's like capturing lightning in a bottle, because you might get some great nights and you might get some exceptional nights. And with that, like no performance is ever going to be repeated the same. And you can say the same for classical music. You can say the same for rock music. But the cool thing that I like to think about with jazz recordings is that is one snapshot. Like, let's say you're talking about Miles Davis. I mean, how many records did Miles Davis appear on? Tons of them. Or even like, let's go with Ron Carter, most recorded jazz bass player in history. I think he was on close to 3,000 records.
Wow.
3,000 albums that he played on. Think about how many, he's approaching 90. Think about how many concerts and gigs he's played that were not recorded. In comparison. Like those 3,000 records might be 10% of his creative output that was captured on recording.
Wow.
And so the entire, like almost the entire representation of the evolution of the music was captured on recording, but it's like really just the tiniest crumb of the entire pie of what's actually been played and out there. And that's also what I love about it. It's like, we're just, you don't get everyone on their best night on these recordings, but it is, like you are kind of piecing together the puzzle of like, what is the history of jazz music through these bootleg recordings, or, recordings where someone lugged in a tape machine in the back of a cafe and half of what you hear is glasses dropping.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
Noise.
Gosh. I love that.
It's a vibe.
Let's go back to the studio for a second before we wrap up. So you are planning to record all of the label's releases. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have the first 5 planned, and 2 of them are already done. So one I didn't have any hand in. The other one I mixed and mastered. So besides those, for all future releases, we plan to do everything in-house. And
that obviously saves a lot of money. You're going into it with not a lot of expenses.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's my donation of time. Like I guess in a way you could say like, I don't want to look at it as losing money, but like I'm donating the time and the equity there. But from a production cost, it definitely saves the business a lot of money.
Yeah. No, and there might be a case down the road where it's built into a recoupable cost or something, especially if you start bringing in other engineers or mix engineers, mastering engineers. We talked about this privately, and this was something I experienced because I did the same model that you did. I know that you've just recently recorded and mixed a record in a short amount of time, and perhaps jazz is a little bit more live than multi-tracking a folk record or an indie rock record over the course of a year. I got to a point where I was exhausted of the process and exhausted of the music, and I was no longer proud of the record. To a certain extent, that's being a bit extreme, but it's like there were some compromises made and we're done, and I want to now move on to the next project. So the idea of having to promote and put the weight and my name behind this record that I worked on, and this is true for my own releases as well, not just other artists' releases, but I hit this wall of exhaustion and just feel like I had milked all of the creative excitement out of this record. Are you prepared for that? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, well, I see that in my own music making, playing on other people's records as well. And I mean, one of the things that I've gotten used to, I think this is one of the advantages of being a jazz musician, is that very early on, I started to record. For a while, I was recording all of my gigs. and listening back to them. So I got so used to listening to myself play that it's interesting. Like also with the concept of a jazz record, again, it's just a snapshot of a moment. So it's not like this is the perfect way that I plan to present this song. Like this is my take on this song that will remain cemented this way for history. It's more like, here's a snapshot of what I'm doing in this moment. And
it's like they're all live recordings.
Yeah. I mean, even in the studio, it has the live recording, the live recording element. So in that sense, there are certain things where I listen back and I'm like, oh yeah, like I could tell that I was more thinking about this thing rather than this other thing. But I've kind of become desensitized to judging performance based on quality. I know I made the Duke Ellington quote before, but it's more just like, are the choices that I make effective or not? And that's really helps me in the studio a lot. So getting back to these releases, I'm probably more critical of my mixing and mastering than I am my playing at this point, just because that's the thing that I mean, for anyone listening, like I didn't go to recording school. I've been in and out of studios my whole life, but I'm about as self-taught as you can be with this.
Yeah.
And so, I went to a conservatory for bass playing and got 2 degrees. So for that, I'm very confident with what I know and what I can do. So for that, I'm less judgmental. With this recordings, I'm sure I'll listen back in 5 years and be like, wow, like why did I use the lexicon reverb and not the this reverb? Those kinds of things. Like my taste and my understanding will adapt.
But you're not necessarily going to be exhausted to the point of just based on the recording process, you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there's something so cool about the recording process. I mean, of course, I get to a point where, like this record that I submitted today, actually, to the vinyl pressing plant, after mastering it 3 or 4 different ways for streaming and vinyl and all this stuff, I'm like, my ears are the biggest liars in the world. I have no idea what I'm listening to anymore. Like, I think there's a sort of what's the phrase or the word, like discernment. My ability to discern is kind of gone. But I will still,
you recognize that.
Yeah, totally, because I get to the point where I'm not making things better, I'm just making them different, and that's where I stop.
You touched on it earlier, but what is the recording fingerprint of this label? Have you settled on that? One of my friends, Will, has a bluegrass label in Nashville called Skyline Records, and it's a brand new label. They do brand new releases, like new bluegrass compositions. And one of his mandates is high fidelity, professionally tracked, professionally mixed, like very crisp sounding bluegrass records, as opposed to, the lo-fi in the barn kind of stuff. What is that sonic fingerprint? Are you still establishing that, or do you have a template in mind?
Yeah, I think I'm still establishing it, but when I know who my favorite engineers are. I can also share about this because I think it gives some insight. Like James Farber, who has recorded some of my absolute favorite records with Joshua Redman and Brad Meldau. His recordings are just like, it's like listening to a Monet somehow. It's just the most flattering, velvety, just the most flattering representation of what you can get. Or Max Boleman, who recorded for Criss Cross. I had the pleasure of meeting him this summer. The thing about these engineers is that, one, they're actually both jazz musicians in their own right, but they are such passionate lovers of the music that they dedicated their lives just to really accurately recreating what goes on there. So I strive for the level of sonic excellence that they achieve. So like this sense of realism, like you can close your eyes and say, okay, the bass is 5 feet in front of me, and the drums. I love that. The drums are 2 feet to the right behind them, and the piano is panned.
I love that.
Like that kind of sound. I do take some liberties where I'm like, maybe I want to just get a little bit more juice or vibe out of this. But I want this to be able to compete like next to an ECM record, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want there to be the same level of thoughtfulness behind my choices as my favorite engineers, and the same way that it does with my bass playing. You know, to tie it back to the first question about these different creative itches, like I want the excellence, you know, all these sort of pillars of excellence to stand on their own, but be viewed through a similar lens in the end.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, Danny, it's so great to chat with you about this label that is really not even launched yet, fully formed. People will click the link and go to your website and see that it's coming soon, but it is happening, and within weeks of people hearing this, there will be a release. So it's great to get that perspective of where you're at. And also, folks listening, we're doing Label Mates in a couple weeks. Danny will be there, as well as hopefully maybe some of your partners as well joining us. And so we'll get to kind of continue this story and hear more from you and where things are going. But I love the label already. That clarity call we did 6 months ago or more went so well because I caught your vision, and I thought, here is a piece of clay that is going to make a very nice vase in a very short amount of time. And so congratulations on all that, and thanks for chatting today.
Thank you for having me. And the one thing I just wanted to mention very quickly, which I forgot, is the first record actually that we made is called Until We Meet Again, and it's part of this Carte Blanche series. And it's two artists, Lawrence Wiedauer, we call Lenzi, and Avid Ahmadi. She's an oud player from Iran and is a great singer.
Wow.
And Lenzi is a trumpet player from Salzburg. So that will be out. That's the first record pressed to vinyl. The one that was made, like recorded, mixed, mastered, and sent to pressing in less than 2 weeks. So
I love that. And you know what? I've done that. I've done that before a couple years ago on my own record, and no greater creative experience in my life. And that, when you were talking about this Carte Blanche series, it really puts everything in this box that everyone has to kind of abide by these rules. And that's very counterintuitive for how creativity is supposed to work. But I love it. And it actually creates the most intense creativity or creates the most intense creative process when you do stuff like that. So I'm excited. And actually, when we hop off this call in less than a minute, I'm going to press play on that record. I'm excited to listen to it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you again, Scott. Like always a pleasure to talk to you. And for anyone who's, like I said, thinking about doing a clarity call or wanting to work with Scott, like where we are in our label now, we would not be in the same place if it wasn't for us communicating and getting your insights and everything. So grateful to you for all you've done to help us out. And hopefully this will inspire some other people to also take the leap and do similar things.
Definitely going to clip that. Thank you, my friend.